So hello, everybody. Welcome to this panel. So the official title of this panel is Circulatory Life Cycle Planning and Recycling at these issue time come. Where and at what point and how can investors, stakeholder, operator embrace new methods and technology transparency? So we are all talking about the electrical vehicle in the last few years, and we have to think about the life cycle of these new cars. And one of the main issue is the life cycle these battery will have and the recycling of these battery. What are the environmental impact of these cars, of these battery? And to address these issues, we will be discussing this topic under this panel, and we have three panelists. So I will first of all ask each of the panelists, Ken, Jean-Christophe, and Kiril, to introduce themselves briefly to start this panel.
Hello, my name is Ken Fallu. I'm the Global Head Strategy for Mining at Optel Group.
Hello, everyone. Jacques-Christophe Lambert, Business Development Manager for Lithium Recycling.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kiril Mugerman. I'm President CEO of Geomega Resources, a rare earth recycling company.
Good. So we'll start by the first question. How do we see this circular economy in the production of critical mineral versus the marketing positioning of the energy transition? It's a question for every member of the panel. We'll start by Ken.
Thank you, Jean-François. So circularity, it means transparency, and at Optel, we do traceability in different sectors, and we bring the technology that we've developed in the pharmaceutical industry to the mining to do traceability from the pit to from the blast up to the use in electronics and batteries. So this is very important and brings value and visibility throughout the life cycle of the critical mineral, and also bring the expertise and the technology for the manufacturing and the value of the minerals.
Thank you, Ken. Christophe?
Yeah, if I can add to that, obviously, I think that circularity is definitely something that we're seeing more and more in different products. I mean, critical minerals are not the exception. We want to make sure that as we position the transition and the batteries as well, we are able to have a better idea of what's their carbon footprint, not only at the production level of the batteries, but as well at the end of life. That's where kind of recycling comes in, reuse even before that, so that we have a better understanding of the entire life cycle, and using technologies as the ones that Optel are developing today, where eventually we'll be able to have a full idea. And starting with the recycling today is a great aspect of doing this, because you're able to have a pinpoint in the life cycle to start the new cycle again with recycled content, for example. So I think that in the future, as the electric vehicles take more and more space, we'll see that the carbon footprint will also decrease and will be easier to be followed in the future.
Thanks, Jean-Christophe. Kiril?
Yeah, from our side, well, I mean, definitely it's nice that we are in a different time in the global progress, that we are seeing new industry being developed, and the recycling of it is being developed at the same time, which is very different from 20, 40, 50 years ago, when things were being developed, and the recycling would only get developed 10, 20 years later when the problem accumulates. So definitely a very different period in how humanity approaches things. It's not perfect yet, but from a point of view of electric vehicles and the energy transition, whether it's electric vehicles or wind turbines, which are very important to bring us clean energy, very little CO2 footprint, we are seeing not only end-of-life magnets need to be recycled, because we are in the rare earth element space. Magnets are the main drivers of the electric vehicles, the vehicle that's in the image behind Jean-Christophe. Those cars and those motors, they all require magnets. Those magnets are very unique and very particular. First of all, they're very, very strong. To make them is very complex, and to recycle them is not that easy either. So not only that you have to develop an end-of-life recycling process, but as well you need to address the manufacturing waste. So during magnet production, you're looking at 10, 15, 20, 25% of waste accumulated just during the production. And that's because the material is very difficult, stubborn, let's say. So because the way it is made, you produce that waste and you have to address it. So circular economy is not only how do you address the end of life, but as well the manufacturing waste that needs to be recycled. And that is something that we are focusing on. And I think globally we are seeing an important move in that direction.
So Kiril, when you say that when we started, we're starting the industry and thinking of recycling at the same moment is one of the rare moments in the industrial history. Did we learn of the past industrial experience, like the original cars, or we learn from the mistake?
I think it's a general movement. We can call it a social movement. We can call it a political movement. We evolve, we learn, and I think our education system is much more tuned in to circular economy. So if you look at the lithium-ion battery manufacturing sector in China, the reason lithium-ion battery recycling in China is so advanced because they were building on one side of the road, they were building the factory that makes the battery, and on the other side of the road, they were building the factory to recycle them. People understand now both the economics in it and the environmental benefits, while in the past, people only were looking at it as a waste, get rid of it, there's no value. As our technologies become more and more evolved, we are able to reuse those materials. And I think that's one of the things that has driven the transition. It's not only just because, okay, we are smarter now or we learned. I think we have more tools to reuse those materials.
Okay. Very good. So we'll go to question number 2. There's more and more voice discussing the environmental impact of the extraction of lithium and the rare critical minerals. How can your project answer these issues down the road? Kiril and Jean-Christophe, please, your input on this topic.
Yeah, I can maybe begin. Obviously, it's been a big critic around lithium-ion batteries and electric vehicles. I think that we're hearing this kind of question every day at Let's-On about how the recycling can impact the decision of customers when they purchase an EV. I think that bringing new solutions and new processes into the portrait facilitates that debate. At Let's-On, we decided to base our technology purely on hydrometallurgy, so that we wouldn't involve, for example, any thermal processes within the recycling. And we're also basing our project in Quebec to have access to the hydroelectricity here in Quebec, so that we lower the carbon footprint of our process as well. So overall, I think that bringing processes that not only have increase the recovery rates of the batteries, make sure that we handle them properly in terms of managing our waste properly and everything that we're emitting. I think that overall this is going to help the case. What we're seeing today is that the purchasers of the EVs are making a right decision because the footprint of the cells is decreasing with time. But when we're going to start incorporating recycling at large scale into that, I think that the debate will be almost over. So this is where the conversation needs to go. And hopefully, we reach that point sooner than later for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I'll start with an interesting story, and just to show, to highlight how important the consumer decision is in driving what we are doing. I was talking to somebody who was driving his electric vehicle, and he was on the ferry. And the ferry was over an hour and a half. And I said, well, did you charge your battery while you're on the ferry? And he said, absolutely no, it's dirty energy on the ferry. You're burning diesel. So why would I charge it there? You ruin the whole notion of charging it with clean, proper electricity. So the same thing in the electric vehicle supply chain. We want to make sure that the materials are coming from cleaner and more sustainable supply sources. And in the case of rare earth elements, we are seeing that developing a technology for rare earth recycling, what we are doing right now, starting with magnets, yes, those are ideal materials to work with, but we want to address as well the future needs of bringing those materials from the mines in a more sustainable manner. Developing mines in Quebec using traditional processing technologies that are used today in China is not sustainable. It will not get accepted by the environmental regulations. So everything what we are doing, the way we are looking at it, recycling of reagents, we want to recycle those chemicals, those acids. You want to reuse them. You want to use electricity, clean source of electricity. You want to reuse the energy, the heat that is within the process. All those items are within the notion of circular economy, and it's very important to keep that in mind at every stage of developing the process. Hydrogen, for example, during magnet recycling, you produce hydrogen. There are ways of recovering that hydrogen, and we were able to demonstrate that hydrogen can be recovered. And if we are recovering it, and in the future we can basically power the entire plant using the hydrogen that we are producing, let's say, from rare earth recycling. So it's new innovative solutions. We have no choice. And I think that is one of the things that, because those are new industries that are being developed at the same time, and goes back to the previous comment that I've made, because those are new industries, you have to innovate. You cannot go and just use the old methods that were available 50 years ago. The fact that everything is new, it's time to innovate as well in the circular economy aspect of it.
Yeah, you're right. It's innovation by and for innovation and driving this industry. And it's a direct link with Ken, what Ken Fallu at Optel does. The tools provided by Ken. Ken, you.
Yes. So in order to use green to provide the green energy and then in the minerals, you have to do traceability. And this is why at Optel we develop innovate in our traceability tools in order to bring this value, this proof of origin that we call from the mineral up to the consumer. And we have various projects that are going that way. And one of them is with the Nouveau Monde Graphite in Quebec, with a partnership with the Ministère Énergie, Ressources and Investissement Québec, where we do traceability with dynamic calculation of GHG from the blast up to the final purification of graphite, meaning that the different stakeholders that will purchase this graphite will know for sure that it's coming from a controlled environment, controlled measure, socially acceptable, and as well as green energy and with a low GHG operations. We also have various stakeholders like CIREG, who's helping Optel in terms of making sure that we do the proper GHG calculation, as well as a life cycle assessment with that. And this data can go up to the battery, up to eventually in the big world where consumer will make a conscious choice on what they pick within the material that they is contained in their car.
Yeah. And the values are changing. As Kiril was explaining on the ferry example, people care. People want to know what's going on, where it's coming, if the mining was clean or it was only greenwashing in some case. So traceability will be fundamental.
I think that even with the pandemic, one thing that was reinforced was the importance of localization of supply, things that you can find and produce more and more locally as well. I think that one thing that Kiril mentioned was that recycling and battery production is mainly centered right now in Asia, and has been the case for a few years now. I think that in the future, one thing that traceability and circularity will help us demonstrate and help us build here locally in North America is the capability of providing critical minerals on a regular basis to battery manufacturers. And having a localized supply chain helps as well on the GHG standpoint, because you're reducing all the transportation that's required to, right now, I mean, if you look at the supply chain of the lithium-ion batteries, I mean, these minerals are coming from South America, Australia, Africa. They're then almost all going to China to be manufactured. And then the cells are either made there or Korea, and then everything is moving to Europe and the United States afterwards. I mean, that's a lot of movement. So if you're able to reduce that in a significant volume, just because you're able to do circularity here, I mean, that's a huge gain. So I think that that's something we'll see more and more as well.
And Jean-Christophe, that's also increasing GHG of the shipping industry, number one polluter, Africa, China coming back. It's a lot,
Yeah.
And on top of that, I think the recycling also, whenever we don't have the capacity right now, and that's what lithium is doing in terms of high mass recycling of the batteries, and goes back to, again, to the supply chain and up to China. And I think to come back to the example of Kiril, if people would know what is involved today in terms of the making of a electric car, maybe they would think twice, because it has a big impact. I think we need to shrink the supply chain, use more local, and that's why we're working with Quebec in order to bring the proof of origin that graphite is low footprint and coming from a local source, lithium, and everything has to and recycle within the same parameter. So this will only be done by traceability.
Yeah, and that's why between Uptel, Geomega, Lithium, it's all you're all aligned, you're all complementary, and you're all on the same boat.
Yeah, and the one thing that is very important to our industries, both within the lithium-ion recycling, magnet recycling, rare earth recycling, is we need governments to do more to attract and to bring those factories, those facilities, because we can recycle, but if we recycle and there are no factories to accept it, and if the factories are only in Asia, we are still stuck shipping it there. That is very important. We are seeing progress in that with the US investing and building more factories that could use those critical and strategic metals directly here. Canada, we are starting to see a movement in that direction as well. European Union certainly already started a big movement in that. So that is the next step in closing this the circular economy. Before that, those factories only depended on where the mines and where the processing was happening, which was mostly Asia or more specifically China. But now they are seeing that, okay, the supply is coming closer, and because we need to be more independent and because the supply is available, it's time to start building those factories. Once those factories are there, it's much easier to get all our recycling processing industries going much faster.
Yeah, it's a combined two front between the social values and on the other side, the geopolitical needs putting pressure, double pressure, going all in the same sense. Ken, I have a question rapidly. The market is going toward circular economy down the road, but one of the main tools is traceability. How long will it take the market to adopt and generalize the traceability?
That's a good question. Well, that's why there's initiatives, various initiatives that are going towards like a battery passport, where everybody will have the same standard in order to share the data. This will take time. We've done it in the pharmaceutical industry, and it took 8 to 10 years, but it came with legislation. So at a certain point, different government will have to establish legislation, or at least force the companies to provide the minimal data that will need to go up the traceability chain for the battery passport in order to bring this value to the customer and show the green side of the batteries. So this will take some time, but every step matters at this time. So every little step we take today to bring toward this goal is a win.
Good.
Yeah, I just want to add to that on magnet recycling, for example. Right now, those magnets, looks like, Ken, you're using 1 gram of magnets in your phones. Jean-Christophe, you're using another gram. Jean-Francois, you're using 2 grams in those headphones. So those are tiny little magnets that they're lost. They have been mined, and now they will get lost. And during the recycling process, unfortunately, they will find their way together with metal scrap. Not even copper, not aluminum, right? They really end up in scrap metal. Because it is 70% iron and there's only 30% rare. So it's valued at, well, it's tiny and it's hard to separate, and it's true. Now, as we are going to bigger and bigger applications for magnets, such as our electric vehicles, the electric scooters, and you name it, all those motors, pumps, they're starting to take bigger and bigger motors. But then it makes it to the recycling center. And at the recycling center, they say, what do I do with it? I don't want a magnet. Oh, okay, it's just metal scrap. So until those, as Ken mentioned, those government legislations come in to say, no, this is critical material, has been mined once, has been mined in China, guys, let's keep it here. So once those legislations start coming through, it's much easier to enforce it. In the past, we've seen legislations forcing recycling because of an environmental issue, but not because of a geopolitical issue. I'll give you an example. The phosphorescent lamps that are, well, I think, I suspect those are still big, long tubes behind you in the ceiling. So those, there is a program in Quebec to recycle them, and that's because of the mercury in them. So we don't want mercury in the soil. So legislation comes in very fast. We need to recycle it, it's important. But when the need is geopolitical, we are seeing that it takes much longer time, or when it's just a general economical reason, we don't see that government legislation kicking in much later. But the sooner it kicks in, the faster it is going for everybody to recycle their electric vehicles, the magnets, the motors, the batteries.
Yeah, if I can make a parallel on the lithium-ion batteries, I mean, obviously when we're thinking about an EV battery, it's often a very large battery pack, you know, something that's 450 kilos. So there's a misconception sometimes that these batteries will be kind of left around or will end up in landfills and things like that. But I mean, that's definitely something we want to avoid, because obviously there's electrolytes in them that could be contaminating our soil. But the thing is, it's not going to happen, you know, simply because of the size of the battery and as well its economical value. You know, even today, these batteries are finding their way to recyclers. It's just a matter of how can we recycle them properly with an efficient scheme for transportation, for processing, and having the circularity in mind. The problem today is that these batteries are burned mostly. So that emits a lot of GHG, and you're losing over 50% of the components, whilst not necessarily doing the recycling, you know, the full circularity, because the purity of your materials is not good enough to be returned to batteries. That's an issue. That's why we're there. You know, we want to make sure that all these problems are solved and that we can do exactly what we need to do with these materials.
Yeah. So Jean-Christophe, you bring a very good question and angle. Can we say that electrical vehicles are ecological without having the total full cycle, including the recycling of the battery?
I mean, there's a lot of components to that question. First thing is, and I think that first thing is going to depend where the battery is going to be manufactured. I think that we're seeing more and more cell manufacturers today going to places and choosing their locations based on having access to cleaner energy. You know, Norway, Finland, you know, are attracting a lot more cell manufacturing today because of that. So I think that's a really interesting shift that we're seeing in the industry. The other thing is this vehicle being used in a country where you have access to hydroelectricity, for example, here in Quebec, where you know that you're going to be charging this vehicle with something that's been renewable. So I think that encourages the case. I saw a report recently that was saying that, you know, HICE vehicles, the impact in Quebec, for example, was 6 times lower than the HICE vehicle when you're using a vehicle in a hydropower environment like here. So I think that, and that was without taking into account recycling. because it's not available yet at large scale. So I think that when we incorporate recycling into that, I mean, the impact is going to be huge, and the debate, I think, will stop, and we'll be able to constantly increase the gap, I would say, between the ICE vehicles and the electric vehicles on the environmental footprint. So it's not just about recycling. I'd say there are multiple components to that element, as we mentioned, because the supply chain is so complex. But recycling is essential if you want to do something good for the environment, and we want also the adoption of electric vehicles to be global.
And like we said earlier, it will take a lot of time to get a critical mass for everybody to adopt, maybe 10 to 15 years in order to have full circle. But in the meantime, we can do data collection at every steps in order to start the process. This is why the battery passport has started, and by 2030, they want everybody to be ready to do full traceability of the life cycle of the battery, from mine to recycling and repurposing and back to the car. And this will bring a lot of values within the supply chain and the resources that will be used, and the activity that will be recorded around the battery. But this recycling part, like Jean-Christophe said, is very important within the life cycle.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add on this. I think you guys covered the topic well. It's all about closing the cycle and traceability, and more companies involved in this, or a very clear chain of custody of how things are being done and going from one spot to another, processed, and then again, what we said before, then going to make the next battery or the next magnet. Where is that being done? I think we've seen Apple's been a really good example with this. They said all in their cell phones, they're all made with recycled rare earths, with recycled magnets, and they have control of their supply chain probably better than most other companies in most other industries. So they are able to trace that and to put the right controls in the right factories to make sure material is collected, to make sure the material that's collected is recycled properly. And then once it's recycled properly, it's then going to the next manufacturing stage to make the next magnet. And the same thing is going to apply to the vehicles. Obviously, a vehicle is a very different beast from a cell phone, but it's all probably moving in the right direction. And I think the 10-15 year horizon is something doable, where we'll be able to say, yes, our car is much cleaner now than what it used to be. And then it's a question of adoption of all those processes, all those technologies, ISO regulations that will kick in to control all this. So I think we are definitely on the right path.
Totally agree. Okay, I think we're progressively wrapping up this panel. Maybe a last, Ken, Jean-Christophe, Kiril, you have a last comment or input for the people?
I can start. Thank you, Jean-François. So everything that we mentioned, there's something that is kind of new to this industry. It's traceability, is to know where it's from, know the impact, and know what has been done towards the material and the provenance. So the industry is starting to focusing on that. There's still a lot of work to be done in this sector, but this is why we're working with different association and government at different level in order to bring transparency, traceability toward the life cycle of the batteries.
I think that, from the electric vehicle standpoint, I think that, what we're seeing right now is a lot of things are moving towards providing not only more vehicles, but as well vehicles that are cleaner and cleaner. I think that all the OEMs today hopefully they're looking at, providing almost a carbon neutral EV. I think that this is the objective. And what we're seeing is that this won't be achievable without recycling. And our goal here at Blitzon is to make sure that we can do that and scale it. I think that Obviously, recycling is really thought of as often local. Everywhere on Earth, typically, you recycle your things in your own country and make sure that this stays locally. But I think that with the lithium-ion batteries, it's a global problem and it's a global supply chain. So we have to have this thinking of working with partners on a global standpoint to make sure that we achieve, as a society, this transition. So I look forward to see how this will develop, and combining this with traceability, I think it's definitely the direction that the industry needs to go, for sure.
Yeah, no, I think we are at the tip of the iceberg here in terms of recycling, circular economy, better, cleaner processes in the mining industry in general. We started working recently on getting rare earths and aluminum and iron from bauxite residues, which is the aluminum industry. But it's the same thing. It all goes into the vehicles. It all goes into everything that we use. And there is more and more talk in all the sectors, the green or the clean aluminum, the green hydrogen. Everybody wants metals to be sourced in a smarter, cleaner way. And I think, we all represent Quebec companies, and I think Quebec is trying to be the leader in all this, and in providing the energy and the right infrastructure and the right platform to promote all those sectors and move them forward.
Thanks, Kiril. So, thank you, Jean-Christophe, Ken, Kiril. To summarize, there is a lot of work for policy decision maker, for politician, for industry leader, from academia, people working in the innovation sector. We all need to work together to align to have a solution down the road earlier than later, and the market will clearly go earlier than later toward this full life cycle circular economy for the electrical vehicle and the battery. So thank you very much, everybody, and we'll have the chance to talk in the near future, I hope.
Thank you, Jean-François.
Thank you.
Everyone.